Hi there, this is Richard Denning here from Medusa Games, and I'm going to be taking a look today at Tabletopia and doing a conversion of a board game in that platform. I've already shown in another video my Great Fire of London game, and we'll take another quick look at that along with another adaptation that I'm doing at the moment for my Nineworlds game. And I'm going to take you through the beginnings of setting up a game on Tabletopia and getting the elements in there that you will need in order to publish a game, which can then be used to demonstrate your game online. Ultimately, it can be in the library of Tabletopia as a playable game, which obviously increases the range of people that have access to your design. You can also use this as a playtesting tool, very useful playtesting tool, as you can bring in all the elements and basic components, try out all sorts of mechanisms before you set upon a design. So let's have a bit of a look then at this. So this is Tabletopia, tabletopia.com, and Tabletopia has a couple of elements to it. There is the element of the playground, which is where you'll be actually playing games in Tabletopia. So if you go in there, you can go and find a game to play. You can find other people to play games with. You can invite your mates in or friends in to play games with you. But I'm going to be looking at the workshop side here, which is where you can create the games on Tabletopia. So this is the workshop, and this is my workshop with my games that I'm currently working on. Here you can see Nineworlds, Great Fire London, and the blank box here for Tinker Tailor, which is another one of my games I've been looking at. You can see there's a create game button, and we'll look at that in a moment, and underneath there are useful video tutorials, information and FAQs on how to create games and how to do game setups, and a checklist to have a look at when you feel the game is ready for publication. So to give you an idea about what the games look like, this was what we were looking at in a previous video, which is my Great Fire London game, which is a fully interactive game. You can move in, you can grab pieces, you can move them around, you can take cards, you can flip the cards over, discard them onto the discard pile, move components around the board, just like you are actually playing the game. And if you are playing with other players, obviously you would also be seeing their little hand moving around the board, interacting with the game as well. Okay, so that is that's the Great Fire game that I'm moving towards getting ready for being available on Tabletopia. We've also got here Nineworlds, and this is one I'm just sort of playing around with at the moment. So I'm entirely happy yet with all the elements that I've brought in here, particularly the background, which I'll talk a bit about. But you can see, if you know my Nineworld game, here is the board. Here are the character cards, summary cards, which you can actually have a look at, and I'm using here some standardized components that come with Tabletopia rather than introducing 3D elements, which you can do as well. You can import your own components. So that is Nineworlds, and if you see, as you zoom in on it, you know, the resolution is pretty good. Right, so let's have a bit of a look at the basics of how to set up a game and how to start designing a game. So to get going, you would go into Tabletopia, go into the workshop, go to create game. When you do that, it will start you on a blank form, which you will fill in. So here you can drag in an image. You can browse and go and get an image. They quite like this to be a 3D box type image. So if you've got one, then you can bring that in. If you haven't got one, then obviously you might need to get one made. There are various tools online that'll take two-dimensional elements of a game box and convert them into a three-dimensional image. This is a sort of backdrop to the game design page, which is quite nice to have, as it makes the whole thing look nicer. And I created one myself, by just combining elements from Nineworlds. This gallery underneath here, this is meant to be snapshots of the game in play. So once you've actually designed the game, you can take screenshots, and then you'll bring those screenshots in to give people an idea about what the game would actually look like when they're playing it. You can add links here, so you can sort of say your publisher site, like that, and go and get the URL that you want to use there. There it is. And just copy and paste that across to into there, like that. So that's now added a link for Medusa Games. You can add rules. So if you've got the various language versions, and you can choose from a variety of languages, and you can then browse, go off and get a file of the rules, and import that into Tabletopia. So you can import basically as many different language as you want, and additional rules. If you've got expansions and things, you can incorporate those as well. Over here is your game name. Obviously I've already created Nineworlds, but this is just a temporary one for showing you the idea. Additional. Okay, game type. So here you can choose from different sorts of games that it'll fit under: classical, abstract, party, war games, adventure, cards, and strategy. That's the URL that's automatically generated, which is going to be the URL of this game on Tabletopia. Age limits, or general age range for playing it, and your typical game length can go in here. Okay. A description, and actually, to be honest, I just took the description blurb from Board Game Geek, or my standard blurb that I've got on the game, and Nineworlds. Here we are. This sort of blurb is what you're going to need, just to give people an idea of what the game's going to be about. You can add credits here, so you can add on your name of yourself as the game author, if that's who you are. You can put the publisher down. You can put the illustrator and the designer here so they get credit for the game. And at the moment, this will be set to personal use only, but later on, it will be possible to get that changed to be available to all users once it's sort of fulfilled the requirements for Tabletopia. So then you hit save, but I'm just going to cancel it now and show you the existing page that I created earlier, as I say, on Blue Peter. And it also is possible to add links to the game on Board Game Geek, and once you've done that, it'll go away and naturally go and find the score on Board Game Geek, for example. So making it nicely integrated. Okay, so that is the basics of the initial game page that you're going to need to do for your game. But in addition to that, you're now going to need to create the elements, what are called objects in this, that are going to be needed for the game. So before you even start doing it, it's probably a good idea to collate together assets, if you like, the artwork for the game. So here are various sort of files that I got ready early: the game board, various character cards and summary card, and so on. So that I was ready to import those. So then you go to objects, and you're going to now be creating objects within the window. So if you're looking the Nineworlds here, you will see that I created these objects here for the different components of the game. Now, the avatars, the character cards, the markers, the game board, the game stones, the pieces on the board, the summary cards, the table itself as well, and what's called the skybox, which is the backdrop. So the way you'll be doing this is that you create a group here. So you create a group which you can call it whatever, cards, if that's what this is, and once the group exists, you can always delete them or remove them later. You're then going to want to bring in objects. You're going to be creating objects. Now, objects can either be created by bringing in external artwork, or you can use featured ones, which are the ones that exist already on Tabletopia. I'll show you that in a moment. But let's say I'm going to be adding a card to this setup. I go into there and I get the thing here where I can click on go away and find my front image for a card, and it'll import it like that, and I can go away and create the rear of that same card. Now these you want to have identical sized, and all the cards of a type you want to make sure that they are identical sized, because then they can be created in stacks in the game, and you can handle them as groups of cards rather than individual objects. There's other things you can do with objects, but generally you just need to basically be giving them a name, which will generate a URL automatically for that object, and you can say whether this is language independent or English, for example. Now these cards actually have English and German on, so I wasn't quite sure which one to do with that, whether plain on one side but English and German on the other, so that it doesn't look like you can select two languages, so you'd have to go with one language. And if you want, you can add a description for this object that explains what the object is. That can help you later perhaps, and give some idea about what the object does in the game. Okay, so you're creating the card, and once you hit the save button, it'll go away and start the publishing process, as it's called, which will you can see now it says game element in publishing Q3. Please wait until publishing is completed. So it'll sometimes this can be instant, literally moments. Sometimes it can take actually a while, depending on how busy the rest of Tabletopia is, or whether lots of other people are in here converting lots of stuff at the same time, or particularly heavier, more intense conversions will obviously take a while. That took about 30 seconds or so. I can edit the object if I want to. I can preview it to see what it's going to look like in the game world. See if you're happy with that. It'll sometimes take a moment or two for it to render itself in the game world, and this is a basic environment with a basic table that it's shoved the thing on, but I can still interact with it. I can flip it over, I can move it around, I can if I want to, if there were several of these, I think I could probably also collect them as a stack. Anyway, that just shows you that object to see what it looks like, and then when you're happy with it, you can exit, and it'll take you back into the workshop. Okay, so as you can see, therefore, what you need to do to get the game ready is to go in to the game and into the objects, and to create all the elements that you need. So in the case of the cards, these character cards I needed for Nineworlds, I basically brought in so far 4 of the cards, as you can see here. For my Great Fire game, I had to import as many different designs as I needed for that game to work. So this process can sometimes take a few hours, where you get things nicely formatted and ready, and import them and get them ready for then moving on into a setup of a game. Various objects you can create, so the cards are fairly easy. There are different sorts of markers and counters. Whenever you create some of them, you can drag an image in here as an example of it, and you can decide what the colour of the counter is. So, for example, if it's got image on the top, but the side of the counter is just a colour, it can have a colour, and you can make those different colours, and you can make them different thicknesses as well, because this is going to be a three-dimensional object in the world when you get it into the game. You've also got dice, and dice. I'll show you the standard ones in a minute, but you can create them by bringing in images, and create customized dice of different types that you might need in your game. You've also got game pieces, which are usually your markers and things that are going to move around, the pawns, that sort of thing, and tiles, and tokens. They all have slightly different functions and purposes in the game, so you sometimes have to play around with which one of these is going to work the best for you to use. The game board is obviously very, very important. That's where you put that. A music box is the ability to actually have music being played, and sound effects and so on. You can have looping background music happening. Now you've got to play the game on something. So by default, you'll be on that. There is a table, and you can't create as an object a table. You just have to use the tables that come with the game, which I'll show you in a minute. However, you can create alternatives, what are called surfaces, and surfaces are an infinite sized playing space that can be anything you like them to be. So they could be wood, it could be metallic sort of looking colour, it could be water even. It would be a playing surface that you play upon. I actually prefer the table design because I feel the surface makes you feel a bit like you're sitting on the floor rather than actually sitting around a table. But it's worth having a bit of a play around with that, seeing if you like that. And another object will be what's called the skybox. So the skybox is actually effectively a room that you are going to sit inside with your game. So that room will have a front and a back and a right and a left, and effectively an up and a down, a ceiling and a floor. And you will you will design, have those. You'll bring those in, and you can make them anything you want. So in Great Fire, for example, I did have the backdrop. I've closed it down now, but I had the backdrop to Great Fire, the actual cover image, which I got a big wallpaper version of. And so what I was able to do was to sort of cut that up into chunks and have a sort of surround that felt like you're actually playing the game in the middle of the Great Fire, which is quite interesting. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the objects here. So as I say, you can create your own and import your own. That can include three-dimensional objects, which you would have to create in a 3D mapping program. Now, one thing I should say about that is that, and I'm just going to come back on here just to explain this a minute, is that three-dimensional objects have X, Y and Z coordinates. Now, in the three-dimensional world in which we live, we think of X as one way, left and right. We think of Y as the sort of forward and back, and we have Z as up in the air. And if you use a mapping software for a 3D printer, that's the way the coordinates work. However, computers don't do it that way. computers think of X, yes, as left and right, but Y, because the screen is flat upwards in the air like that, they think of that as the up is the Y dimension, and into the screen depth is a Z dimension. So your problem can be that if you use a 3D, depending on what software you use, you have to be careful where your Y and your Z axes are, otherwise you can end up with objects that basically, when you import them in Tabletopia, just lie on their side. And it took quite a while for me to work out why fire cones that I was bringing into Great Fire would literally be just on their side. I just couldn't get the things to stand upright, and it was because of this difference between the two. So there are options for flipping Y and Z axes that you might need to experiment with if you design your own 3D software, 3D objects. Okay then, so moving on from that elementary physics lesson, let's get back to actually using the Tabletopia interface. So as I said, there are a number of objects that come with Tabletopia, and which might mean you don't need to bother with any of this three-dimensional design in Lark. All sorts of bits and pieces you can see here. You've got cubes, you've got cylinders, you've got lots of standard dice that come with it. There is some customized dice designs, discs and of different sizes and diameters, houses, which is a godsend for Great Fire because that uses lots of houses, meeples and pawns, and then these Napoleon busts, which is slightly random. I think there's another thing up here, wasn't there? Yes, these busts up here. You've also got bags, which are nice because they're a nice little touch. So it means you can have different bags that will actually literally look like that on the table, and that's a good way of having objects which you want to have randomly drawn from a bag, or as just a place to store stuff. So in Great Fire we have lots of houses, lots of fire cones that don't get used at the start of the game, but will come out later, and so rather than being just cluttering around on the board, you can have them in one of these bags. So yeah, lots of objects that come with the game to start with, which help you. Mean you don't necessarily have to import much at all. That you're going to still want to probably import your own art if you've got it. Okay, so things like skyboxes and surfaces and tables, actually there are standardized ones that come with the game that you can use. So in the case of surfaces, this would be effectively an infinite surface with this sort of design on it. So literally a wooden floor. So the game will literally be laid out on the floor, or a stone surface. And as I say, you can create your own. The idea of surfaces is you're not restricted to the table sizes, although the table sizes can be modified in the game to be a reasonable size, but I think there is a limit to them. There are some standardized round tables and square tables, and this, which I quite like, this light wood table, which you can then make different sizes when you're in the setup mode. Okay, so well worth having a dig around within those standard off the peg objects. Now, other thing I would say about importing 3D objects is that you can only do that if you've got a higher level account. The basic account, I think, limits what objects you can use to be able to import things and bespoke and customized objects. You need to have a higher level access. Okay, so let's assume now you've done the business of creating your game design, and you're going to now the objects rather are all there ready to go, and now you're going to put it together into an actual game design. So you need to go into the game, and you need to do create a setup up here. I click create setup, and I can decide what number of players this setup is for. So if there are setups for say 2, and then one that works for 3 and a 4 and a different one for 5, then you're going to want to create setups for each of those different number of players. Great Fire and Nineworlds all have setups that vary completely dependent on the number of players. So I would need to do a separate setup for each of the players. You can say whether this is language independent or not on the actual setup itself. You can say what the winner conditions are, whether that's victory points or something else. At the moment, access is set to. You can decide whether it's available for personal use or available to everybody else. Ultimately, you're going to want to do that when you publish this. And there are other options for mobile type of games. So now what you need to do is make sure you follow this process. Create or select featured objects for the game. We've already done a lot of that work already, so our objects are ready. So now we're going to edit the setup, set the objects up on the table in preparation for publishing the setup. So here we go. This will take just a moment to run the launch thing, and this is it. This is our virtual three-dimensional kind of environment. Not a lot to it at the moment, but we're going to put lots into here. So for example, you can modify the size of your table this way, but you might want to bring in a slightly more interesting table. So I earlier on imported this object to the lightwood table, which I quite like, and there we have a nice wooden table, which I can decide I'm going to make let's say 120 centimeters on a side. You can fiddle around with it until you're happy. So there's my table. Now I need to get my board on the table. So let's go off and find the game board here, and just basically drag it in. Give it a moment and it will basically show itself on the thing. You can position it where you want. You might decide now to adjust the size of the table further. Once you've got it ready, I recommend right clicking and locking the board. If you don't do that, then once there are pieces in play, so let's just bring in an object or two like that. So there's now a couple of pieces on the board. If I don't lock the board, it's literally possible to flick things around, and eventually you can, depending on the object, these are very stable, they can sometimes just fall over. So best I think to sort of to lock the board like that. And now I'm not doing anything apart from moving the whole table, which it doesn't shake all the objects when you maneuver the table around, because that's more about your angle of view. You're not actually moving the table. Okay, so you now need to bring other elements into the game, and this now is you work your way through all of the components as if you were setting up the physical game. So you've got you bring cards in, you can bring in your sort of markers that you've got of varying sorts. Now a trick here is that once you've got one marker, say that you need a whole bunch of these, you can right click on them and you can go duplicate, and you can have, let's say, 12 of them. Now what's going to happen is they're all going to appear in a great just drop on top of each other like this as a great big column. So you might want to start moving them around a bit. But you can adjust them where you want them to be. This is where actually, you see that one that fell over. That can happen. And sometimes you just need to give it a flip so it lies back on its base there. Okay, so you can bring in components like that of varying sorts, these avatars, and essentially place them on the board where they're gonna start the game. So what you're thinking about here is, imagine you've got the game out of the box, you're getting all the components out, you're putting them on the table, you're laying the game out. So the idea is this will be saved, so when you come into the game to play it, you don't have to do all that bit. You're just ready to go with the game setup, and that can include packs of cards. It can include things like this summary card, which is available for players to have a read of in the game if they want to. If there are rules that are linked in that you uploaded earlier, that will automatically get pulled into the game when you launch the game into the game world or game room later on. Okay, so and then once you are, and if I wanted a sort of skybox, this is what I just grabbed something fairly basic. I just drag it and drop it off there into the black, the void around us. Give it a moment, and it'll surround us with a sort of a 3D room. I use the same design for all these walls, so you can have different coloured walls, you can have different designs. You could have that as a nice picture of a wood, or that a library, or anything you want really. So the skybox is actually quite a fun sort of environment. And basically you just carry on repeating. And once you've actually good to go, you go here and you save and you publish the game. Or you can save, or you can exit without saving, which I'm going to do with this setup. But once you publish it, it'll then chug away at itself for maybe sometimes a few minutes, and eventually down here in the setup, it will show you've got a published setup. You see, you're working on setups here for different numbers of players, and that's really all there is to it. You carry on doing that until you've got your setups ready. Now, when you want to then try it out, that's what these play zones are for down here. So you can create a play zone for whether or not you want everyone to be able to use it, or just Tabletopia users. And you can go and click one of your published setups. I actually only got a 4-player setup published on there so far, so if I had all the other setups, though, it would offer me those options. I can have a little description for this playroom. Now it's given me a URL and this widget. So the idea of the widget is you can embed that somewhere, say a website, like a playtest page on a website that you share with people, and then you can just click on the button and it will take them to the room. Or you can share this link, or you just use that link like that to. Whoops, what have I done now? Have I not saved the? I hadn't saved it. I've been playing around with this. There's only a limit to how many open games you can have at any given time on Tabletopia, because whilst I've got the I think a premium account, I think it is as a designer, I've only got a basic account as a game player, which only allows you to have 2 rooms open at the same time. So let me just close. Well, in fact, we'll cancel that. That would have launched you into a room where you would then wait for other players. They can then join you, and you're in the game world. Now, actually, it's probably worth me just showing you that after all, because there's something on there, a feature that's useful to be aware of. So that's closing down that other one, and it. Now it's launching rooms. This is creating a game world in Tabletopia, and now I'm here. It's automatically plonked me in there as a player and as host, and there are these vacant seats. Now I can launch the game without the other players, and that it's perfectly fine to do that just to try the process out. But equally at this point you can invite players. So you can go off to, if you've got friends set up on here, I'm actually setting it on here at the moment, or you can go after available players, or you can just take the link like that, copy the URL, and then give that URL to people that you want to invite in to play in this room. And ultimately, once you've published the game into the library, then anyone can just run a game, and you can just go in there as well and get people playing the game. But if this is a playtest game, you don't want yet people to be seeing it. You obviously make sure that it's just you're only going to play it within these playrooms, as they're called, which are designed to allow the game to be run and played as if it was a real game on the full site, but just giving you that ability to control who has access to it and who is able to see what's going on. So that's it, really. I mean, I came across Tabletopia as I also run the UK Games Expo, and we were obviously starting to look at the business of doing virtually Expo and how publishers could demonstrate games online, and so started looking about with different solutions. There are different solutions out there. So if the games are already in existence, digitalised games on Board Game Arena, well, that's great. But it's quite a lot of work required to actually do a fully programmed, functioning game in that sort of environment, because it actually runs the game for you. It has an AI. It runs the game, whereas in Tabletopia, as you can see, it is a sandbox environment, as it's called, which means you're moving the elements around yourself. So you run the game, you explain what people are doing, you tell people to pick up that piece there and take it there, just like they would do in a physical game which they were interacting with. So therefore, I think it makes it quite accessible to publishers to create these games, and also during this world of lockdown and quarantine and everything, where we can't get together, allows you to put prototype games on here. It doesn't have to have anything more than basic art. You can import a crayon drawing or something like that and it'll still be functional in that environment. So that's Tabletopia, and they will do conversions for you. There is a fee for that to be done, and I'm sure will give a very professional result. However, it is not by any means difficult to do your own conversion that will at least suffice for playtesting and demonstrating the games. Whether it would be up to the quality required for their library is a different question, and they may need to make some changes before it could be published into that environment. Anyway, I hope that was a useful look at the Tabletopia and how to do the basics of getting games imported and set up. Hope you found it useful, and I'll leave it there. And we'll probably be doing the next one of these broadcasts videos is to just have a game played in the Tabletopia environment with streaming the game in play just to show you how that can work, and how I think it can be used also for playtesting purposes.